Welcome to Mission Oriented, a VeteranCrowd podcast that showcases veteran talent from both the private and public sectors. Their impact is everywhere. We are here to uncover it. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is Bob Louthan, host of the Mission Oriented podcast on the VeteranCrowd Network. Pleased to have as my guest today, Charlie Eadie. Charlie is the founder and general partner of CMD Capital. That's Command Capital, as they refer to it, out of Charleston, South Carolina. Charlie is Army veteran, a friend of mine. We had a good time a couple of weeks ago out in San Francisco at the MilVets Startup Conference. What a great conference that was. Charlie, thank you for being on the program. Welcome. Good to have you here.
You bet, Bob. Great to be here. Good to see you again.
Hey, yeah. So I always like to start off and do a little history lesson with my guests. And so we're going to talk about growing up. There are a lot of things you and I are going to talk about today, but let's hear the Charlie story of how you got into the Army, because I think that's kind of interesting. And then had a few surprises along the way. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So my story is I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, which is an interesting spot. It's on the beach in Northern California. So it's a generally peaceful spot, but there is a little underbelly of rough crowd that I found my way into, unfortunately. Or it depends on how you look at it, I guess, fortunately, because I learned a lot in the process. But needless to say, I was rough around the edges and found my way into juvenile hall, thanks to my mom, who sent me there to try to straighten me out. And so I told the judge, if you let me off the hook here, I will join the military and straighten out. And so I enlisted in 1999 as a combat engineer, and got my duty station of choice, which was Hawaii, the 25th ID. And I got the $50,000.
Digging holes in Hawaii. I mean, there are worse jobs than that one, right?
That's right. Surfing in the evenings and playing with landmines and explosives during the day. So yeah, I enlisted. I planned to just do 4 years. I wanted to get money for college and some discipline, and that's why I joined the Army.
Did you get it?
I did, yeah. I'd say so. I got my hands full. So, the time in Hawaii was great for me. It was a really structured environment, and I excelled. And I was Soldier of the Year and Expert Sapper, which is kind of like Expert Infantry badge, but there's no badge. And then some officer named Tom Fear, who's a West Point grad, came up to me and said, "Hey, Charlie, I think you'd make a great officer. You should go to West Point." I said, "Sir, let me show you my high school transcript first." There's a reason I joined the Army, and it wasn't because I was going to go to West Point. I had never even heard of West Point till I
not an Eagle Scout either, huh?
No. Not an Eagle Scout. Definitely not an Eagle Scout. I did community service at the order of a court, but yeah. So I showed him my high school transcript, and it was ugly because I had a 4.0 my first 2 years in high school, and then I started running around with the wrong crowd, and I had a 1.86 GPA my last 2 years in high school, which is all they ask for when you apply to West Point. So I had to write 1.86 GPA and community service that was court ordered, and no real extracurriculars to mention that are worth mentioning. And so he persisted. He said, you should apply. And I applied, and he PCS'd to a different duty station. He was a major. He was our XO, I believe. And I got a call back from Soldier Admissions who said, "Hey, Eadie, we got your application. We don't know what the heck you were thinking. You're not competitive at all." And I said, well, Major Fear told me that, I should apply. And they said, "Well, we don't know who Major Fear is, but the only way you're going to get a shot to go to the academy is to go to the prep school. And the only way to do that is you got to take your SATs over again, take these 3 college classes," which I did. So I went, to night school, essentially, as a soldier. I took classes down at Pearl Harbor and Honolulu and on base at Schofield Barracks and got straight A's. But then I got a slot. I went and tried out to go to Ranger school. I went to the pre-Ranger tryouts and made it in, and then got through the course and graduated 4th in the class. And so I got a slot to go to Ranger school because I thought, this whole West Point thing is just a pipe dream that some officer came up with. So I called back to the admissions department and I said, "Hey, sir, I got orders to go to Ranger school. And if I don't go straight through, which 80% of people do not, I'm not going to make the report date for prep school." And he said, "Oh, that's okay. Just go ahead and go. We'll figure it out." And so again, I thought there's no chance. And so I went to Ranger school. I went through True Blue. And I got my letter of acceptance in the Florida phase, which was, when you're totally emaciated, I was 30 pounds down, no sleep kind of situation. I got a little emotional, cried, couldn't believe it. And so then, I got an opportunity to go to the prep school and ultimately West Point, which
Did you get out of Ranger school and like literally go straight to the prep school?
almost, yeah. I went from Ranger school to back to Hawaii to pack my stuff, and then flew right back to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and signed into. I still had my chipmunk cheeks from all the weight gain after Ranger school. I ate like it was my job. So yeah, I showed up with chipmunk cheeks and a Ranger tab, and I'd been through airborne and air assault school as well. So I had a lot of experience going into that program.
Do you have to get a congressional appointment before you go to NAPS, or when does that happen? Or the way you came through, you didn't have to get get one of those congressional appointments?
Congressional nominations? No, that's not required. So what we get is a superintendent's appointment. If you graduate from prep school, you're automatically into the academy. So I skipped all that, which, we'll kind of get to later, how interesting it was to learn how I actually did get into the academy. It was totally the back door. It slid me in under the radar, and I snuck in there. So
the story just gets better every time I hear it. Okay. So, all right. So how was the prep school compared to Ranger school? I guess it was actually pretty easy, huh?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, so interestingly enough, when you go to prep school, you have more privileges than you do as a plebe, which is an adjustment.
Yeah, they don't put you through the hazing bit in the prep school.
Well, they do a cadet basic training, or cadet candidate basic training, I guess it's called. And so they do some, all that relative to Ranger school though was like a walk in the park. And fortunately,
I imagine the prep school. Most of the people that are coming through there are athletes. Number one, that's how they redshirt.
Yep.
Number two, most of them have never worn a uniform before the day they stepped on post. Right.
That's right.
So how many folks were there like you that were prior service that were coming through NAPS?
People
not NAPS, but the prep school.
Prep
NAPS
school,
is the Navy prep school. Yeah.
Yeah. USMAPS is the Army one.
Right.
And I think there was maybe, 50 of it. No, not 50. It must have been like 25 prior service out of 200, maybe 10% less. And it shows, right? You end up getting leadership positions. A lot of the prior enlisted folks were in leadership positions, and that afforded, the kids that are coming right out of high school an opportunity to learn from us. I led a pretty disciplined unit. I was the first sergeant of Charlie Company, and or cadet first sergeant, and I was notorious.
You already knew how to salute. You knew how to do an about.
Yeah.
It's all of that stuff. You just didn't have to learn. Whereas everybody else was really starting from scratch.
That's right. And so when I got to the academy in particular, they tell you right at the outset that 55% of your cadet performance score, the way we're going to rank you and the way you're going to earn your branch and post, so your job and your location, is 55% academic, 30% military, which is like your, education, military arts education, and your leadership positions, rated positions. And then 15% physical. And so I walked in and I said, this is an easy math problem. I'm here to go to college. 45% in the bag. Let's just do school, and that was what it was like for me. It was like, I'll just tell you frankly, I could never have made it through a regular college. I went out to Penn State when I was at the prep school and did that whole frat party scene. And I don't understand how people graduate. That lifestyle would have been no good for me. I would have failed. But going into the highly regimented, disciplined organization that the United States Military Academy is, I thrived and I really enjoyed my time there. I had a lot of good fortunes. I guess a little known fact is I walked onto the track team and threw shot put, and I'd never thrown a shot put before in my life. And then I got disqualified by NCAA because I didn't have a lab science in high school, and I had to try to fight it and tell them, hey, I've got the top grade in the class of 2007 in chemistry right now, and they still wouldn't let me play.
The NCAA
NCAA.
disqualified.
Yeah.
Huh.
But
Let's come back to that. Hold on.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to that. Hey, you're listening to the Mission Oriented podcast on the VeteranCrowd Network. My guest is Charlie Eadie. All right, Charlie, we got to come back to this. NCAA, you were on NCAA probation because you didn't have a class in high school?
Yep, that's right. So they disqualified me because I didn't have the, I guess, requisite, transcript from high school. And so we argued, but the reality, Bob, is I knew that I was going to try out for the parachute team. So it was kind of a funny
I'm
situation.
Glad to know that the NCAA wants to make shot putters have high school chemistry. I'm glad to hear that that's the case. Okay. Anyway, back to so you're going to the parachute team anyway.
Yeah. So it was funny because I was on the track team and I was down there running laps around the track as a thrower, and everyone was asking, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm getting ready to try out for another team, and you got to do a PT test and other things to try out. And what they really, at least when I joined the parachute team, the OIC, the officer in charge, was really involved in the selection process and wanted to see that you were, thriving in all three pillars of, performance: academic, military, and physical. And so, interestingly enough, our class had the first captain, so the senior ranking cadet in the whole Corps of Cadets. I was a regimental commander of 2nd Reg, and then DJ Edwards was 1st Regimental Commander. So we had 3 of the top 6 positions on the parachute team, and that's a team of 10 that they select each year. But I got to jump out of aircraft 700 plus times. I won the collegiate national championship one year. I've got my medals over on the wall. And it was a ball. I got to jump the game ball into football games. I was always the guy that led it in and was the jump master. So interesting story there. The first jump that we did as a class into the stadium for a game, it was a 4-way team that consisted of me first, John Nielsen second, who was the first captain, Joe Kernow third, and Katie Hilligus fourth. And I was the one spotting, jump mastering essentially. And we threw out wind indicators to check at 2,500 feet, what the wind was doing, and it was dead before the jump. So I put us on jump run and got us oriented the right way, and step out right over the 50-yard line, right? Jump out, wave, get down to get under canopy and start pulling down my risers so that I can spiral down to 1,000 feet and set up for my approach. Well, as I'm doing that, if you've ever been to West Point and you've been up to the stadium, you'll know that Lusk Reservoir.
Mikey Stadium. Yep.
Mikey Stadium. Lusk Reservoir is directly east. And all of a sudden I found myself drifting over Lusk Reservoir. And so I quickly let out of the spiral and started aiming myself back at the stadium, and you can see where your trajectory is going to end you. And I was fighting with everything I could by doing the atomic pull-up, pulling my front two risers to dive the canopy to try to get penetration into the wind. I barely made it into the stadium, was probably even with the uprights, and landed on like the 35-yard line. And who was
come through the goalpost?
Almost, like almost. It was that close.
That's good.
Yeah. So
if you were carrying the game ball, it would have been very symbolic.
Yeah, I was carrying the game ball. So I made it in with the game ball. And my regiment was standing on the field. They had done the march on. And then John, the first captain, and Joe, the third guy out, both landed out. So they landed off. And then Katie, thank God, made it into the stadium with the flag. And our coach was furious. And the superintendent actually told John he didn't particularly want him to jump anymore because he had broken his leg in Ranger School and never got his tab because of it. So he was all worried, and it was a crazy time.
That is just wild. Okay. Well, you're listening to the Mission Oriented podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. My guest, Charlie Eadie. Hey, Charlie, let's talk a little bit about, we're going to come back to the story after West Point in just a minute, but let's talk about Command Capital. Tell everybody what's going on with that. You're the founder and general partner of a new fund. Let's talk about and tell everybody what that's all about.
Yeah. So, I founded this with two other West Point grads. We actually announced the launch at the Military Veterans Startup Conference. So it was good to see you out there. And obviously we had some things to talk about. We got together and came up with an investment thesis focused on 4 categories: national security, infrastructure, mental health, and social impact. And that sounds like a broad array, but that's what we think the doctor ordered for society right now. Because in particular, we've got ever evolving threats to our national security, particularly in cyber is an interesting space for investment. And we've got dilapidated infrastructure and antiquated processes and systems in the infrastructure market. And then I think we've got an acute mental health crisis. And I've got a personal connection to this. And so I think we need to focus on fighting the stigma in mental health and improving access to care. And so I'm hopeful that there will be a lot of disruptive startups that answer that call. And then last is social impact. And I think the best way to summarize why we focus on that is that we all attended the United States Military Academy, where we were trained, educated, and inspired to become leaders of character for a lifetime of service to the nation. And so we feel we need to do something bigger than ourselves in this process. And that's what, inspired us to launch Command Capital. And the tagline is investing where innovation commands capital. It is CMD Capital legally, but we refer to it as Command Capital.
So you guys are raising funds and setting this fund up. Are you ready to actually make and consider investments at this juncture?
Yes, we're starting out with special purpose vehicles. We think that's the best way to build track record. I will tell you, there are plenty of headwinds out there. It is a difficult time to raise money, but we are actively doing it, and we've got some solid interest. Another interesting thing about Command Capital that we're doing is I have this vision for bringing together entrepreneurs with special operators, professional athletes, and world-class academics, because I think if you can get that high caliber personnel in the same room or Zoom, that magic will happen. And that's proven itself out. We've done rehearsals where we had the Command Master Chief of SEAL Team 6, Dave Cooper, who did the op against bin Laden. He was on our Commanders of Innovation event, where we had the two startups, Bugle, which is a social impact startup that aims to double volunteering in the United States by 2030, and Cyberspatial. They both pitched, and then we had Dave Cooper join and give a guest speech about complex systems. and he's doing a PhD in complex systems. So pretty interesting stuff. He's an academic and a special operator, elite of the elite. And it's proven out that interesting things do happen when you bring them together.
How do people find the command Capital, CMD Capital? Right now, I want to learn more about it.
Yeah, the best way to find us is probably through LinkedIn. So if you find me, it's just Charlie Eadie, Eadie, or CMD Capital on LinkedIn. That's where you'll see most of our stuff. The website is cmdcapital.co. So any of those.
Okay, so we're going to put links to CMD Capital, and we'll put Charlie's LinkedIn profile on the landing page for this episode. Hey, this is going to be the end of the first part of our discussion with Charlie Eadie. Charlie, thanks so much. But we're hanging on. I want everybody that has enjoyed this broadcast to tune in again and with follow-up with part 2, because we're going to go back. I'm going to tease you a little bit. We're going to go back and talk about Charlie's experience in the Army, and we're really going to get into the mental health issues. This has been the Mission Oriented Podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. Charlie, I'll throw out a Bravo Zulu for your performance today. I can't wait until the next episode. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you for listening to Mission Oriented. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and you won't miss an episode. To learn more about Mission Oriented and the Veteran Crowd Network, visit us at www.veterancrowdnetwork.com.